You might notice a menagerie of tools all over the shop here. Yeah, we're having more issues with this poor waterlogged motor. And as you can see, our crank is now screwed up. I can't get the Magneto off. I've tried every puller. I even had to rethread the holes to a larger size because it just kept pulling them through and stripping them. And yeah, I don't know what to do now other than write this whole engine off and get another one, piece it together from parts, or cut the Magneto apart and replace it and see if we can salvage the crank. And the electronics inside are probably fried. I know I hit one of the coils when I was drilling through there to tap that. Despite my best effort, it just pulled me right in. So we're gonna see what we do from here and see if there's a way to get this off here without destroying the crank. That's what we're gonna do. Boys and girls, here's the damage. This is what we're looking at. There was no other choice. That sucks because that Magneto looked like it's in pretty good shape, and obviously the magnets still have magnetism, but there wasn't anything else I can do, and we're still gonna have to deal with this piece of the Magneto that's stuck on this crankshaft. This crankshaft is a little mushroomed on the end, but I should be able to fix that. And we'll rethread that, and I'll grind this down, and then we'll do some touch-up welding. And if I have to put this in the lathe and reestablish our center point, that's really not a big deal. I can take this connecting rod here and tie it back, and then we can spin that on the lathe. Or I can reestablish it by hand and do it on the mill. So that sucks, but at least we can take out our coils now. You can see we did damage a coil. That's not ideal. That's about 60 bucks there. Looks like we've got some busted wires in here. That's probably my fault too. I did my best, but here we are. So we're just gonna deal with it. We're gonna move on, get this thing taken apart and see what's salvageable. And whatever isn't salvageable, we'll be looking for replacements. Now that being said, we're gonna try and split this along its axis here and get this thing to crack free without damaging that crank. So wish me luck. Alright boys, I was able to get the coils out of the way, and I just warmed this up with some MAP gas carefully, and I had an idea to warm that up and hit it with the air hammer, and that worked. So let's see if I can lift this off with a rag. Oh yes. So I think that this thing had spun because I could stick a little rod all the way down in there and touch bottom. I think that's why it was stuck on there, and then of course rust. But I think that crank, it looks terrible probably on camera, but I think it's savable. And I believe our coils are savable. I don't know if I can repair that other coil, but I'll try. I know they're available. And we had to sacrifice that Magneto. There's nothing else we could have done. It wasn't going to come off any other way. I heated it. I used every puller in the arsenal. I used every trick I could think of. Left pressure on it, tapped on the puller, you know, put penetrating oil in, let it cool, let it heat, blah, blah, blah. Nothing doing. But that being said, with all that being done to it, I think we're going to be testing these coils and just making sure that we haven't ruined them, and we haven't got any shorts or anything like that, and that they have the proper resistance. So now that that's done, let's lift this stator plate out of here. Ooh, it's still a little hot. And then set that down. We've got a little bushing in here. Hopefully that's not a piece of the stator I broke off. Nah, just looks like a loose spacer, so that's gonna just have to go in there. But yeah, that's your crank seal right there, what we're looking at. Right there, that guy. So this was several days worth of swearing at this thing to get it apart, and I finally just had to make a command decision here. Somebody had to take one for the team, and it was the Magneto, unfortunately. But I can get another one. I checked on that beforehand. So all in all, you know, I don't think we did too much damage other than a little bit of wiring damage. We can solder that, sleeve it, and repair it. That's not a huge deal. So I'm gonna get back onto splitting this case. Alright guys, I wanted to show you proof of what I was saying about this spinning and getting stuck on there. Look right there. Look how polished that is. That has spun on the crankshaft. So that's why that was stuck on there. It was galled on. I mean, that's still shiny too. So I don't know when that happened, but this guy said he had it running. So what do you guys think? Was this bike running at any point in the last maybe 5 years? I have my doubts. Not calling anybody a liar, but I have my doubts. That right there is the smoking gun we were looking for about why that wouldn't come off. So now that has me a little concerned, and I need to investigate this woodruff key and check that crank really good. I think mostly it's down there on the bottom. You can kind of see that. It's like a little witness mark right there. So that's something we do not ever want to happen again. And like I say, we're going to fix the end of this crankshaft or get a new crank. If this is screwed up from that spinning on there, we might just be getting a new crank, but we'll see. I think I can fix that. So, got all the case bolts undone. We had one right here that was sticking. So the way I like to do these is to get my bit. These are all JIS, by the way. So you can't use a sharp pointed Phillips on there, but these blunted Phillips bits, if the camera will focus, work pretty well. So I'll take these and I'll tap them in there till they kind of stick with the 3-pound sledge. And once that'll stick on its own, I'll put the Milwaukee on there gently and just squeeze the trigger very slowly and evenly to bring that ratcheting action up slowly, ramp it up slowly. And then you'll get to a point where it's not moving, but you just sit there and rattle on it, and it's not stripping it, just rattle on it, and all of a sudden they'll break free. That's been the most successful way I've found to do it. Now, if you don't have one of these, you can do this by hand with like a small ratchet and a 1/4-inch socket or bit holder, and do it that way, but it can be a little bit more difficult. Do not try to do it with a Phillips, this hairy Phillips that has all the shavings on it. Don't try and do it with a Phillips. You're just going to give yourself blisters and strip that thing out. I'll be replacing this bolt right here. It looks fantastic down inside. The threads aren't galled or anything, but it didn't want to come out. So that's going to get replaced. We're not going to even goof around with that. In fact, I may replace all of these with hex heads. I hate these Phillips. Absolutely hate them. Stupidest idea they ever came up with on motorcycles. And you can get a whole kit for like 20-30 bucks to do the entire engine and, you know, save yourself the trouble of having to deal with this ever again. So keep that in mind. Next thing, when I get a minute, is we're going to split the case in half. So I've got to go do some other work right now, and then I'm going to pick up another bike this afternoon, so I don't have time to do any more on this. My goal was to get the Magneto off, and we did, you know, I mean, not all in one piece, but we got it off. And then I've got to clean this gigantic mess up. This is all from this bike, and this isn't even all of it. So this is embarrassing. I hate my shop being messy like this, but I do have a microscopic shop, so we'll get that cleaned up too, get reorganized, and we've got all of our parts organized and bagged up in 2 different boxes. And I'm going to make a template for this, and that way we've got this all organized, and then we can take this apart, sandblast it, get us some crank seals ordered. I'll get my new sprocket seal, shifter seal, all that, and we'll go about powder coating these case halves. Okay, well, we got the case apart, no drama there, but yeah, look inside here. Transmission side looks really good, just sludgy, but we can clean that. Gasket came off in mostly one piece, so it's too bad it didn't come off all in one piece, because I'd really like to just pattern this. I don't want to spend the money on a gasket kit with everything else I got to buy, but if I have to, I will. What I wanted to show you in here is our main crank bearing is locking up. See that? That's grinding and crunchy. So I can't even turn that all the way. That's going to have to be replaced, and I assume the other side too. So we're just going to get them coming and get a kit for those and our other seals here. So I've got several seals in here. This one here for the sprocket, and the one for the shifter. goes on there. So might as well just get a full seal kit coming and go ahead and get this cleaned out and remove our transmission gears. And I'll probably slide this back together. I should have pulled the clutch apart on the other side first, but I got a little bit ahead of myself. I wanted to get this case apart. I just couldn't stand not knowing what was going on in there. So now we know. We'll want to inspect everything closely. Just make sure. And then we'll go back and measure our cylinder and all that stuff so that we can see if we need to bore that and get a new piston. I'm kind of concerned because on the bottom of that cylinder, you know, down at the bottom edge there, it's not showing like the hone is touching it, but I need to measure it for sure. Look at that. This is gross. Ah, it's like somebody blew their nose in there. That was inside the transmission, probably, you know, up into here, wherever the oil level was. So once again, good reason to split the case. I'm gonna have to clean all this out. Oh my gosh, that's gross. But at least the gears aren't rusted. You can see back in there, we don't look like we got any chipped gear teeth, and they look like they're in pretty good shape. You can see a little bit of wear on the thrust side, but not too bad. This bike has fairly low miles too, so I think the biggest problem with this bike was somebody left it outdoors and let water get inside of it. But we're gonna fix it. We're gonna be into this hundreds of dollars. Hundreds of dollars. I still don't know if I'm gonna have to replace the crank or not. It seems like that bearing is still working nicely opposed to this one. But I want to get in there and maybe put them in some evapor rust or something, get rid of any of that, and then rinse it good with some solvent, and then put some light oil on it to protect it. Because if I can save the end of this crank and build that back up and fix those threads, I think it's fine. This end of this seems to be fairly mild steel. I don't think it's hardened until you get up in here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to give it a shot because this just holds the Magneto on. So all the critical mating surfaces here, the machine surfaces, are okay. So we'll hit this with a file, weld this back up, reestablish our center point in there, and then do what we got to do. Worst case scenario, we'll get a whole new crank. Alright guys, we got the Oogie Monster apart here, and everything this side looks pretty dang good. I don't see anything that looks bad. We're going to have to check that clutch when we get it apart, see how the plates are, see if we need new frictions, and or just a whole new clutch. And oh boy, is this full of goo. Look in there. That is gross. So it's all over everything here, but that's what we would have been running through the transmission. So I'm going to go ahead and get this clutch disassembled and get all this stuff taken apart, and we'll go ahead and get this other case prepped and sandblasted and see if we've got a broken ear on this one too. Very possible. I think that came from them not bolting the engine down in the back. Alright, we've got the crank out, and we've got the case split apart, and the clutch taken out. I'm going to measure these clutch plates and clean them up and see what they look like. See if we need to replace all that stuff. And this is also a reference video for me, so bear with me while I show you all the gory details. But I've got to have this for later. I don't want to miss anything. Got a circlip there we've got to remove. And then we'll start undoing these, and we can pull the transmission gears out. We've had one transmission gear slide off the end, so we need to make sure that we get that back on correctly, because it is different on both sides. Not a big deal. We'll just look it up in the schematics or in the book. And you can get the book on Scribd if you want. You can look at it online, or you can download it, and with a membership you can download it anyway. So here's another thing to be aware of, is you've got these little locating dowels in here, and they do come out, so we don't want to lose those. But I'm going to take a little bit more of this stuff apart, and I'll bring you back in when I've got that done. Friends, remember there's 2 pins that go in this. It's like a sprag. There's a circlip here. There's a washer here. It's going to come off. And then there's this stopper here for the shifter. I don't know if we can need to take that out. And then remember, that's got to come out first before you can pull the transmission gears out. 6305 Koyo, if you want to know the number on that. Alright, we've got this down just about torn apart. Our bearings look really good in here and they feel really good. Even this crank bearing, since it's on the other side of the seal, never got water in it. It feels amazing. But we're going to have to take it out anyway. We'll take all these out because I'm going to replace the crank seal. The guy that I got this from said it was smoking pretty badly when he got it started up. If that's true, then obviously it's going to be this seal here, so we've got to take that apart. And then these, we're going to take them apart. Notice that your lettering is not facing towards the transmission side. So if it is stamped, it's going towards the center of the motor. And then this bearing should be pretty easy to knock through. We've got to pull off the kicker assembly, and we've got a circlip on the other side here. So right there's a circlip. And then we're pretty well done. So this wasn't horrible. The worst part was the fact that this was so messy, but we're going to throw this in the parts washer and clean it, and then sandblast it, and then clean it again. And then we'll powder coat these and repair anything we find. This case half looks significantly better, so I don't know if we're going to find a crack here. There's a little nick right there. We'll see if that turns out to be a crack. And alright, we've got the transmission disassembled. Less as an assembly, more of an assemblage of parts. It's not exactly what I had in mind, but it kind of wouldn't come out together and got hung up. But that does give us the opportunity to inspect things. And everything's looking really good. All of our shift forks here are looking great. Don't see anything that's worrisome on those at all. And let's take a look at the shift drum. I did a KX420 that I got for when I used to work in a motorcycle shop, and it was in a basket of parts. Like everything was just a literal basket case, and part of the shift drum had broken off inside there and jammed the gears up, and that was why they parked the bike. And I was able to just take it apart and pick that out of there and put it all back together, and the bike shifted fine. So we never bothered to replace the shift drum. It didn't hurt anything, but we want to look at this and make sure that we don't see anything that needs to be repaired in here. Like I say, the transmission did not get wet at any point. It was sealed up pretty good. So I guess the crank seal kept that out of there. But all in all, these bearings are reusable. They feel really good. So that's what we'll be doing, and then I'll get this cleaned up. I wanted to show you the other side too, because this really shows you what happened down here, and shows you how rusty that crank got, and why we're having the issues we're having. I got some evapor rust. I'm going to put that in there. If you look at the crank though, this still spins very nicely, and we're not having any issues with that. And as I showed you in a previous video, we're within spec. So we just want to get this cleaned up. Then we're going to address that bunged up end on here and fix that, and see if we can reuse this crank. If not, we'll be getting another crank. The other thing is we want to inspect on this shaft here real carefully. When we get a new Magneto for this, we don't want it to do the same thing. And if that's going to be an issue, then we're going to have to replace this crank anyway. I think next we're going to knock out this bearing and this crank seal, and probably these other two bearings, and then we'll get that stuff out of the way and get it all cleaned up. Alright, these are the last two things. We have a little folding washer here and two 10mm screws, and we're done. Let's try and get this out and do this while I'm filming here. So let me do this off camera so I don't dump this over and lose things to the ages, and I'll meet you back over at the parts washer tomorrow. Okay, let's take her out of the sauce. This is not the next day. I just decided I was a little restless and came out in the shop. So you can pretty much wipe that off now. And this stuff was really hard packed on here. So you can see how that works. Works really well. So we're just going to let that soak overnight, and we'll take that and pressure wash it and rinse it off really good so that we don't have this stuff, you know, sitting on the metal any longer than necessary. And then we'll go sandblast that. Alright guys, I've got the crank in the lathe here. I've just used some foil tape to tie that connecting rod down. And if you look in here, we've got this protected with some copper. So just copper sheets, and this is a machine surface, and we get the steady rest here. Now this turned out pretty good. Those threads look alright. But one problem is, watch this run. So we've still got a little wobble. I'm not sure if that's going to affect us or not, but I would like to try and straighten that out a little bit. Maybe put the nut on here, and I'm going to check the nut anyway, and then see if we can maybe lightly tap it. The camera's freaking out here. See if we can lightly tap it and just straighten it. And I don't think this is overly critical other than maybe for a balance issue, because all this is doing is pulling that Magneto down onto the taper here. And we're going to clean this up a little bit, just make sure we're not going to have an issue here. And then I'm going to investigate this woodruff key situation, see if we need to change that out. Alright, as you can see, the nut and the lock washer go all the way down on there, leaving us, oh, I would say close to 1/4 of an inch on the end of that. So I think we're okay. And I think that's going to be able to pull that down plenty tight. Okay, and I think that crank's savable. So, and we're definitely going to put some anti-seize on here, and like I've mentioned, we're going to do something about that woodruff key. I'm suspicious of them installing that Magneto incorrectly and causing that issue, but I don't know. But 100% that spun on there, and that's what caused the problems. And in all honesty, I should have cut that Magneto off sooner. We would have avoided mushrooming the crank. The other thing I should have done was to leave the nut on the end of the crank. I don't know why I didn't think about that. But yeah, probably from being sick. But regardless, it happened, and we're just going to fix it. You know, shit happens. Well guys, I think we've got this as good as it's going to get. We're never going to get this straight unless we put some heat on it, and I don't want to do that for fear of affecting the heat treat right here. I think it's going to work fine to cinch down that Magneto. And I'm checking the end of the crank snout here. We've got about 5 to 6 thou of run out. If I spin this over, I'm not too worried about that, and let me show you why. That's 5 thousandths of run out. Absolutely minimal, and could be chalked up to surface imperfections, which I'm sure it is. That is 5 thousandths right there. Nothing. So nothing to worry about. Alright guys, so we got the new Magneto in today, and I just wanted to show you, if I can get past the steady rest here, that yeah, we've still got enough threads in there. We're just about flush, maybe not quite, with the end of the crank snout when that's tightened down. And I just tightened that down with a hand wrench. It would probably go a little bit tighter. I just wanted to get it set back on that taper. And I've spun this up, and even though we're kind of wobbling because this load is unsupported, normally you'd have a center in here, it still looks good. This in relationship to the crank weights looks great. And I don't see any need to replace this crank. And the one that I was looking at online, the crank snout was goofed up on it too. Not quite this bad, but bad enough that I don't think it warrants changing it. I don't think we're going to have any net gain. But somebody did suggest that I go through and change that bottom crank bearing. And I'm not going to say he's wrong. You know, he may be right. But I don't see the need for it. As I'm feeling this, there is absolutely no play up and down. It feels great. The bearing is smooth. And I showed you in the other video that we checked our side clearance, and we're well within tolerance. Now, I did get a new bearing for the wrist pin, and we'll see what I do about the piston. I need to kind of get caught up with some sandblasting and that on the cases. I got the other case half in the sandblaster here in my messy shop. So it's sitting in here ready to be blasted. It looks like it's blasted right now, but it's not. So we'll get that taken care of, and then I've also got the Magneto cover right here. And I'll probably be making my own gasket still, but I did buy a center gasket. So I'm having a problem with my vinyl cutter where the belt keeps slipping. I need to tighten it and adjust it so I can cut into that thicker stuff that we'd be doing with gasket paper. But I didn't want that to hold us up, and I wanted to get this put back together and show you guys my setup on here and show you that, yes, the Magneto does go on straight, and this is more than enough to retain it, so I am no longer going to worry about that on here. This is about level with the end of the crank snout. Now if I needed to, I could trim this nut back just a little bit, but I prefer to torque this to spec and leave it alone. Right now, as I said before, this is just hand tightened and just with a little stubby wrench too. This is my tailstock wrench. So it's not that tight, and it's sitting on that taper very nicely. So there's no reason to replace this crank. So we're just going to move on and finish welding up cases and get the bike washed and try and clean out some of the goo and decide what we're going to do about paint on the frame, inspect the frame, and make sure that we don't have cracks in it. If we do, we're going to weld those up and repair. But every time you strip off paint, you see stuff, just like we did on the case. I think they were just kind of rough on the engine. So that being said, we're going to have to weld up this crack on the ear, and I'd like to weld these up and rethread these. I don't know how tall this was, and this one, I don't know what's going on here. There's a crack right there, and then it looks like they might have tried to drill a bolt out of there. It's hard to say, especially when it's sandblasted, because it kind of changes to be all the same color. And then this one, obviously somebody hit something and it snapped the bolt out of there. But magnesium's a little bit tricky to weld, so we got to be careful about doing that. And this is going to require some serious heat, so we'll probably have to preheat with a torch, because you put too much heat into magnesium, then it just slumps. It's even worse than aluminum. It's very easy to ruin the weld. And if your standoff from your arc length is too long, then even with good gas shielding, a lot of times you'll start to get oxidation and porosity in there. And from what I've seen on these castings already, they're pretty porous. So I don't know about this one. Let's look on the inside here. This one looks a lot better than the clutch cover. That clutch cover is something else, and I'll be showing you that probably next video when I get that welded up. I goofed up and grabbed the wrong rod, so I was trying to weld it with a different rod, a stainless rod instead of magnesium, and didn't realize my mistake until I goofed it up. Alright guys, we've got it all stripped down, and while I'm welding up those castings, I figured we'd pressure wash this before the weather gets too cold. So take a look at her. Lots of goo to wash off. Cleaner. You can see all that goo on the fenders came off. That's another indicator this bike was stored outdoors for quite some time. I think that was mold. But in here, even the purple power isn't touching this. So I'm giving her another soak, and we're gonna have to let it sit for a while and work. I may end up just having to strip all this by hand, but most of it's off. Well, this is as clean as she gets. It's still got some goo on it, and that's going to take some scrubbing to get off. I'm not planning to powder coat this frame. I'd like to paint it. I might just touch the paint up. It just depends on how this looks when I get it all cleaned up, but I'd like to be able to touch it up in the future too, and powder coat I can't do that with. I may powder coat some of the brackets in the satin black like this, and you know, anything that's easy to fit in the sandblast cabinet or in the powder coating oven or whatever. But unfortunately I can't even do the frame because it's too big, and even after I modify my oven it'll be too big, so I need a much bigger oven. But I thought I'd give you guys the overview now that all the moss is washed off here. That's too bad this bike sat out like it did, but I'll probably just be getting new plastics for it at this point. In for a penny, in for a pound on this one. We're going to be welding up more of the cases for the engine, and yeah, eventually plastic, tires, all that crap. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe. This is Reaper signing off on another one.